Bonjour à tous. As a country,
Hello, everyone.
In the fight against COVID-19. But we have to remember that the situation remains very serious. We're not out of the woods yet. As we move into the summer, we'll have to keep adjusting our routines. Our cities will have to adjust and change, and our approach will have to be tailored to each community. That means the rules and public health recommendations you're asked to follow may be different depending on where you live, and that can be confusing. But right across the country, one thing will stay the same. Everyone has a responsibility to themselves and to the people around them. So keep practicing physical distancing. This is how we protect ourselves, protect our loved ones, and protect the most vulnerable. Moving forward with reopening must happen gradually and carefully. And the right safeguards must be in place, including testing and contact tracing. This is key to keeping us safe and keeping the situation under control. What reopening means for you and for your family will be different for everyone. Just take the realities facing small business owners. Some are ready to open their doors as soon as they get the green light that it's safe to do so. But for many more, getting back on their feet will be a challenge. And one of the biggest concerns is paying rent. That's why we created the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. This benefit will provide forgivable loans to landlords so that they can lower rent by 75% for small businesses hit hardest by COVID-19. It will also be available to nonprofit and charitable organizations. As of 8 o'clock this morning, applications have now opened. If you're a landlord with up to 10 eligible tenants and you're located in the Atlantic, BC, Alberta, or Quebec, you can apply today at cmhc.ca. For landlords in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and the territories who have up to 10 eligible tenants, tomorrow's your day to apply. Landlords with more than 10 tenants will be able to apply later this week. To landlords, please apply. And to business owners, make sure you're holding up your end of the bargain as well. The Canada Emergency Business Account can help you pay your rent on time. And the wage subsidy, which we're extending through the summer, can help you rehire your workers. We're all in this together, and together is how we're going to get through it. Depuis 8 heures ce matin, les propriétaires de logements.
As of 8 a.m. this morning, commercial landlords will be able to apply to the CMHC website for the commercial rent assistance measures. For leasers who have over 10 commercial tenants, you can apply today, tomorrow. Landlords in Manitoba, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and the territories will be able to apply, and landlords with over 10 tenants, 10 commercial tenants, will be able to apply the day after. We have put in a number of measures to help businesses, and we're finding even more ways to help them. Today, we have opened a telephone line with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to help you navigate through this uncertain period. Entrepreneurs and vulnerable businesses, including charities and nonprofit organizations, will be able to obtain assistance from an accountant or financial advisor by calling the Business Resiliency Service at 1-866-989-1080. This line is for organizations who may not otherwise have access to financial advice. To take off some pressure during tax season, we're also putting off the deadline for some income tax returns. Those who were supposed to submit T2s or T3s in June, July, or August will have until September 1st to submit their returns.
Every day, in every part of the country, hardworking Canadians build prosperity and growth in their communities. To come out of this crisis, our country needs workers, people like you, more than ever. Our government knows that. And we know that you deserve to be treated fairly on the job. This is something that I spoke with the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, about yesterday. Nobody should have to choose between taking a day off work due to illness or being able to pay their bills. Just like nobody should have to choose between staying home with COVID-19 symptoms or being able to afford rent or groceries. That's why the government will continue discussions with the provinces without delay on ensuring that as we enter the recovery phase of the pandemic, every worker in Canada who needs it has access to 10 days of paid sick leave a year. And we'll also consider other mechanisms for the longer term to support workers with sick leave. Personne ne devrait avoir à choisir entre prendre un congé.
No one should have to choose between taking a day's sick leave or paying the bills. Nobody should have to choose between staying home with COVID-19 symptoms or buying groceries or paying rent. That is why the government is continuing its talks with the provinces to make sure that when we begin our economic restarting our economy, everybody will have 10 days of paid sick leave a year. We're also considering other longer-term measures for workers who need sick leave.
With our plan to get Canadians the support they need. Whether you're an employer or an employee, we're working to make sure you can focus on what matters most. Getting back to work safely, adapting to new realities, and keeping yourself and others safe. You will drive our recovery, and as you do, we'll be in your corner every step of the way. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Journalists on the telephone. Thank you.
The Globe and Mail. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. What is your explanation to Canadians today about why your wealthy political party is accepting taxpayer money during this crisis in the form of the wage subsidy?
We know families across the country depend on the jobs that they do to pay groceries, pay for the rent. That's why we put in place a wage subsidy that is available to small businesses, large businesses, nonprofits and charities to be able to support people who might otherwise be laid off. This is going to be an important part of the economy bouncing back, and that's what we're focused on.
As a follow-up?
When your government created the wage subsidy criteria, did you anticipate that political parties, including your own, would be among those applying for assistance?
We knew from the very beginning that it was going to be important to ensure that people could keep their jobs, whether they work in the private sector, whether they work for nonprofits or charities, to be able to continue to support their families and to make sure that our economy can come roaring back as quickly as possible once we're through the crisis phase of this pandemic. That's what we ensured was in place right across the economy, and we encourage companies to take on that wage subsidy because it is the best way of keeping a link between workers and the job they do that will ensure that our economy comes back when this is all done.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Raymond Filion, TVA. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Coming back to the provinces, the discussions you announced with the provinces on paid sick leave, how would that work? How much do you think that would cost, and who would pay the bill? Would it be employers? These are clearly all important questions, and we are now talking to the provinces about those very issues. We recognize that we are in a crisis. Businesses don't have much financial flexibility, so we expect that during the crisis it is governments who will pick up a large part of the bill. But something we do have to think about for the long term is this. After the crisis, it may be important to ensure that all workers, regardless of what they do in Canada, do have paid sick leave, and will be working with the private sector to ensure they do. At present, we're talking with the provinces because this is an area of shared jurisdiction. When do you think exactly that this would begin? Would it begin in the summer? Would it begin in the fall? I would also like to hear you talking in French about the fact that political parties had applied for the salary subsidy. You're okay with the Liberal Party dipping into these emergency funds, given the millions that your party has raised? With regard to your first question, in October and November, when people once again start having colds, when the flu season kicks off again, we don't want people who start feeling ill, the symptoms that could be COVID-19, be torn between trying to hide their symptoms and going to work, because they'll lose their paychecks if they stay home and they won't be able to buy groceries. We know that in situations like that, we need to ensure that over the coming months, we have the flexibility to make sure that anyone who has COVID-19 symptoms has a choice and is able to stay home so that they don't spread the disease. This is what we're working hard to avoid. Now, on your second question, the wage subsidy is designed to help people keep their jobs, regardless of whether they work for a private company, a non-profit organization, a charity, or any other organization. It is very important that people who depend on their jobs can continue to keep them and be ready when the economy starts up again. And that is why we wanted the subsidy to be available to non-profit organizations and charities as well.
Marie Vastel, Le Devoir, à vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Marie Vastel, Le Devoir. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to continue on the second topic, the wage subsidy that your party has applied for, as have the other parties. This was rather poorly received by Canadians. The Conservative Party, both leadership candidates, Mr. McKay and Mr. O'Toole, say that they will reimburse these funds if they become the leader. As leader of the Liberal Party, do you believe that the Liberal Party should not accept the wage subsidy? I believe that during a leadership race, candidates will make different proposals, and it is our position not to comment on internal Conservative Party debates. We established the wage subsidy to help workers in the private sector, in non-profit organizations and other businesses. They depend on paychecks. People depend on their paychecks. It's important for people to keep a connection to their jobs so that they can be ready when the economy starts up again. Marie, follow-up? I'm asking for your position. You are the leader of the Liberal Party. Do you want the party to renounce that wage subsidy? And if not, what do you tell citizens who will say that you have millions in your party coffers and yet you are dipping into emergency funds to give wage subsidies to people in your party? There are workers in all kinds of organizations across Canada who depend on their jobs, who depend on their paychecks to pay their food bills, to pay their rent. And we decided to make sure that the wage subsidy would be available to businesses and to non-profit organizations. That decision was made so that the economy could restart quickly. We need to support Canadians regardless of the organization for which they work.
Thank you. Merci. From Stephanie Levitz, the Canadian Press, line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Your government, as well as provincial and local ones, ask Canadians to make pretty big sacrifices to curb the spread of COVID-19 in order to give the healthcare system time to get ready. When we look at federal procurement data, it suggests you've obtained anywhere from about 0.6% to 23% of the goods you set out to buy to help equip the hospitals and frontline workers. So I'm wondering if you have confidence that the system is in fact ready for a potential second wave.
We have received over 40 flights of PPE into Canada over the past weeks, and will continue to receive flights almost every single day. The amount of PPE we're procuring from international sources continues to increase, while at the same time we are ramping up domestic production of things like masks and gowns and ventilators, the kinds of things that are actually necessary to handle that second wave. We know there's lots more to do, but we have been delivering on the needs that we're seeing right across the country. Nous savons que la reprise va dépendre d'avoir l'équipement nécessaire.
We know that economic renewal will begin on equipment needed to protect workers in the front lines and in our industries. That's why we're continuing our efforts to obtain the equipment we need. We have received some 40 flights delivering personal protection equipment. We will continue receiving such flights. We're also ramping up our domestic production capacity to make sure that we have enough equipment for a potential second wave. Question de suivi, Stéphanie.
Commissioner has asked both you and the President of the Treasury Board to send a very direct message to your ministries that they need to be proactively open and accountable during the pandemic. Why have you not delivered such a message?
We have made transparency and openness a watchword of this government from the very beginning. And with every announcement I make, with every announcement the ministers make on help for Canadians, we've been absolutely transparent on the investments we're making as we move forward. But we recognize there's always more to do in terms of openness and transparency, and we will continue to demonstrate that with Canadians, because we know fundamentally there's an issue of trust and of confidence. And if Canadians can continue to have confidence that their government is working hard for them, they will know that continuing to follow public health recommendations, continuing to know that they're going to be supported as we move through this pandemic, will leave us all better off as we begin to recover. Nous savons que l'ouverture et la transparence sont essentielles.
We know that openness and transparency are crucial in continuing and keeping public confidence in governments. People have to know that governments are open with them and share what they're doing. When that happens, not only are they confident in their own future, they're confident that the system works, is protecting them, and that it will be even easier to reopen the economy.
Discussions with the provinces on paid sick leave. Where do those talks stand? Do you think that all the provinces are on board with this? And how do you see a national system for paid sick leave? How do you see that working?
The issue of paid sick leave is one that was first brought up a number of weeks ago on our First Minister's call by Premier Horgan of British Columbia, who pointed out quite rightly that when the fall comes and flu season starts up, we don't want people who develop a sniffle to suddenly worry that, well, they really shouldn't go into work, but they can't afford to not go into work. And therefore, the risk of contributing to a second wave significantly could be a real problem. That's why a number of premiers have agreed that we do need to look at ways of encouraging people who begin to exhibit symptoms of COVID-19 to be able to stay home for a day or two, for the time necessary to be able to get themselves tested and possibly treated. These are things that will be essential in our recovery if we are to control the spread of COVID-19. The mechanisms are challenging, and that's why we have to work with the provinces. We've put forward a number of mechanisms to support people who've lost their job because of COVID-19, but the Canada Emergency Response Benefit is doled out in chunks of 4 weeks. And we recognize there is a need for a shorter period of time. So discussions with the provinces around paid sick leave, we're talking about 10 days over the course of the year, could be significant help, and that's what we've agreed to lead with the provinces. Okay. Il y a une couple de semaines, le Premier ministre Horgan de la Colombie-Britannique.
A couple of weeks ago, Premier Horgan of British Columbia said it would be crucial, particularly in the fall, when the flu season restarts, for people who start having symptoms of what might be COVID-19 be able to stay home and not feel obliged to go to work for financial reasons. So paid sick leave, up to 10 days paid sick leave a year is a good idea. This requires working with the provinces. Provinces do believe it's a good idea because people should not be going to work if they feel ill. The mechanisms need to be worked out, and we'll have to work together on them.
Last week. Is there any update on that? Have any other provinces taken you up on it? And how fast do you think we can get testing numbers up and contact tracing up?
Well, one of the challenges we're seeing right now is the laboratory capacity is significant across the country to ramp up testing in a large way. We need to improve uptake. We need to ensure a reliable supply of swabs and reagents, which the federal government is delivering for on the provinces. These are things that are elements of the ramping up of testing and contact tracing. We've seen a number of provinces work very closely with us to be able to ramp up either their immediate testing capacity or else solidify their surge capacity, because even though the numbers may be under control in their regions right now, they recognize that if a second wave hits, they need to be able to respond extremely quickly, and that's what we're ensuring they'll be able to do.
We know that testing and contact tracing are essential as the economy reopens. So we're working with the provinces to ensure that we have the capacity in all areas. We have the laboratory capacity we need, but we also need the testing equipment like swabs and reagents. We also know that some provinces which have the virus under control at the moment still need the capacity for rapid response should there be a second wave, and that is what we're making sure they have.
I'm wondering how concerned you may be with regards to some of the mixed messages in terms of wearing masks, the virus itself, and with businesses reopening and rules relaxing somewhat, along with the warmer weather, especially when we see events or situations like we saw over the weekend with regards to Toronto at Trinity Bellwood Park. What are your thoughts?
I think Canadians have demonstrated over these past 2 months just how serious we all are about ensuring that we slow the spread of COVID-19, that we get this virus under control. I think it is natural for, as we begin to see the economy reopening, for people to be a little confused about what it is they can do, what it is they can do, what it is they shouldn't do. And that's why we're really going to continue to impress upon people the importance of making smart decisions, of wearing a mask where physical distancing isn't possible, of ensuring that at all times you are keeping 2 meters apart from other people. There are going to need to be adjustments as we move forward. Various municipalities and cities might have to bring in different rules to help things happen. But ultimately, we all need to be in this together. We have to do smart things to keep ourselves, to keep our families, to keep our loved ones, to keep our frontline workers safe. We do not want to see a resurgence of the virus. We do not want to see our healthcare systems overloaded. We have demonstrated as Canadians that we can do this. We just need to remain vigilant because we have to continue being very careful throughout the coming months. Okay.
We do know that we are in a good situation with good circumstances in the country nowadays, because Canadians have been able to keep social distancing and to stay home. And with our economy reopening and with fine and beautiful weather coming back, people will have to be even more cautious about keeping 2 meters between each person and between people, and also municipalities will have to make sure that there is a new and increased spread of COVID-19. I know that Canadians want to do the right thing. They want to protect their friends and their colleagues as well. But we will be monitoring the regulations and their implementation to protect one another.
Given China's proposed national security laws on Hong Kong, other than voicing concerns, what can Canada do practically to encourage the protection of democratic freedoms in Hong Kong?
Well, we put out a very strong statement with a number of our allies of real concern for the situation in Hong Kong. I think it's important to support the citizens of Hong Kong, including 300,000 Canadians, who really want to see the one country, two systems approach to Hong Kong and China continue. It is going to be important for the Chinese government to engage in constructive conversations with citizens of Hong Kong to ensure that we de-escalate the tensions, and we look forward to a path that actually allows for prosperity in a way that the citizens of Hong Kong expect.
Ian Wood, CTV News. Prime Minister, last Friday, the UK government said that it would be further reviewing Huawei's involvement in the 5G network and phasing it out completely by 2023, leaving Canada the last of the Five Eyes to really make a decision on Huawei's involvement. Are you still considering their involvement in the 5G network, and when can we expect a decision?
On this issue, we have been taking advice from our security officials. We have been working with them to ensure what is the right path forward for Canada is followed. We are working closely with our allies and watching what they do to make sure that we are all doing the things necessary to both create economic opportunities and growth for our country while making sure that safety and security of our infrastructures, our businesses, and our people is tantamount. We will
continue working with our intelligence bodies regarding the 5G issue, and we will be taking the right decisions for the purpose of guaranteeing the security of our citizens in consultation with our allies.
How is your government going to advance legislation on non-COVID-19 matters like gun control or assisted dying, which is up for a court-ordered review?
I think obviously work still continues throughout the government on important non-COVID priorities. But right now in Parliament, the focus needs to be on this crisis that has taken over almost every aspect of Canadians' lives and of our economy. We will continue to work to address the needs that Canadians face both through this health crisis and into the economic challenges as we begin to recover from this COVID-19 crisis. It's important that we have a Parliament and institutions that function well, and that's what we are continuing to demonstrate. Okay.
Our government continues working on many issues which are not directly linked to COVID-19. However, priority for Canadians and for our Parliament is to bring about a satisfactory response to this crisis, and also to help the restarting our economy. And this is what will be certainly taking as a priority in Parliament. Tristan Noël, Radio-Canada. I'd like to go back to the 10 days of sickness leave. Would that apply only to somebody who thinks he or she has been infected or who has tested positive? And is this going to be shared between the provinces and the private sector, or how much will it cost for the federal government? These are conversations we're having with the provinces and the private sector. However, it's rather simple. If somebody starts showing or feeling symptoms of COVID-19, for instance, he or she shouldn't feel that he or she has to go to work for the purpose of providing for the family. And, for instance, if we have people who have jobs which are, let's say, poorly paid, they shouldn't be obliged to go to work. In theory, we should be looking after the most vulnerable amongst our society. And this is taking place during this crisis. We do not want people to go to work when they're ill. And in order to prevent that happening, we are willing to cooperate with the provinces for the purpose of setting up a sickness leave system. Now, as to the bill and the details, that has still to be worked out, but clearly, we do not want people to feel that they have to go to work, although they have symptoms from COVID-19. Fine, but if somebody doesn't have COVID-19, if somebody has a leg injury, what happens? Secondly, the wage subsidy. Are you aware of the negative impact of this? And people are very angry at this wage subsidy. Well, there are many institutions, many small companies, and non-profit business organizations which are using such people for the purpose of starting again our economy. And this is why we do have this wage subsidy for the purpose of helping all those little or larger institutions and businesses. This is important if we want to put our economy on the right track again.
That people can stay connected to their jobs so that they can continue to support their families and pay their bills while continuing to work for organizations that otherwise might have to lay people off. It's there for small businesses, it's there for big businesses, it's there for nonprofits, it's there for the charitable sector. This is something that is going to be important for the economy to come back, and that's why we put in place the wage subsidy.
Merci, c'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci de vous joindre à nous
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with
we'll
us
have the
this morning.
opportunity of hearing from Dr. Tam, who is Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, Dr. Nu, who is Deputy Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, as well as Mary Eng, Deputy Minister Eng, who is Minister of Small Businesses, Export Promotion and International Trade. Dr. Tam.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and bonjour à toutes et à tous. I will start with the latest numbers on COVID-19 in Canada. There are now 85,103 cases, including 6,453 deaths, and 44,219, or 52% of cases, have now recovered. Labs across Canada have tested over 1,479,000 people for COVID-19 to date, with about 5% of these testing positive overall. In the past week, we've been testing an average of around 22,300 people daily. These numbers change quickly and are updated regularly on canada.ca/coronavirus. This week is Paramedic Services Week, and quite fittingly, this year's theme is Pandemic, Paramedics on the Front Line. I think most of us are aware of the vital importance of paramedics in our healthcare system as first responders, providing life-saving pre-hospital care during times of greatest urgency. This week is an opportunity to further recognize the breadth and depth of expertise of paramedical practitioners from dispatch to first response to hospital. This year in particular, we are recognizing the important role paramedics play on the front lines of the healthcare system during a crisis of the scale of COVID-19. It's impossible to overstate the life-saving importance of our paramedical services. Paramedics respond to all manner of emergencies, from attending the scene of an accident to providing life-saving care during acute health and mental health emergencies. Paramedics have also been instrumental on the front lines of the opioid crisis and now the COVID-19 crisis as well. Paramedics not only provide their expertise and one-on-one human connection, but they also forge working relationships with organizations to promote patient care and improve health in our communities. I recently learned of an innovative program that was spearheaded by paramedics in Renfrew County, a rural area just outside of Ottawa. It is a joint effort of partners across the health system to preserve healthcare system capacity, while at the same time ensuring that people receive the care they need. Through a virtual triage assessment center, patients can be linked with a healthcare provider and provided with an appointment. If an in-person appointment is required, a paramedic can be dispatched to make a house call. This is a wonderful example of the health system coming together to ensure that no one is left behind, and it highlights the important role that paramedics play in linking communities to healthcare settings. This is just one example of how paramedics contribute to health and well-being across the health system and in our communities in innovative ways. This week is a great opportunity to learn more and give an extra shout-out to paramedical service providers across Canada. Thank you. Merci.
Merci, Dr. Tam. Dr. New?
Thank you, Dr. Tam. Dr. New. Good afternoon. As usual, I will start with the latest numbers on COVID-19 in Canada. There are now 85,103 cases, including 6,453 deaths and 44,219 people recovered, about 52%. We have now tested in Canada over 1,479,000 people, with about 5% of them being positive. We are now testing an average of 22,000 people per day over the past week. These numbers change quickly and are updated regularly on canada.ca/coronavirus. This week is Paramedic Services Week, and quite fittingly, this year's theme is Pandemic, Paramedics on the Front Line. I think most of us are aware of the vital importance of paramedics in our healthcare system as first responders providing life-saving pre-hospital care during times of greatest urgency. This week is an opportunity to further recognize the breadth and depth of expertise of paramedical practitioners from dispatch to first response to hospital. This year, in particular, we are recognizing the important role paramedics play on the front lines of the healthcare system during a crisis on the scale of COVID-19. It's impossible to overstate the life-saving importance of our paramedical services. Paramedics respond to all manner of emergencies, from attending the scene of an accident to providing life-saving care during acute health and mental health emergencies. Paramedics have also been instrumental on the front lines of opioid crisis and now the COVID-19 crisis as well. Paramedics not only provide their expertise and one-on-one human connection, but they also forge working relationships with organizations to promote patient care and to improve health in our communities. I recently learned of an innovative program that was spearheaded by paramedics in Renfrew County, a rural area west of Ottawa. It is a joint effort of partners across the health system to preserve healthcare system capacity, while at the same time ensuring that people receive the care they need. Through a virtual triage assessment center, patients can be linked with a healthcare provider and provided with an appointment. If an in-person appointment is required, a paramedic can be dispatched to make a house call. This is a wonderful example of the health system coming together to ensure that no one is left behind, and it highlights the important role that paramedics play in linking communities to healthcare settings. This is just one example of how paramedics contribute to health and well-being across the health system and in our communities in innovative ways. This week is a great opportunity to learn more and give an extra shout-out to paramedical service providers across Canada. Thank you.
Merci, Dr. Liu.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. Mary?
Thank you so much, Jean-Yves. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone.
5 million Canadians are employed by a small business across our country. To the entrepreneurs who run these businesses, you are the key to ensuring millions of Canadians can get back to work as we take the gradual steps towards restarting our economy. You're at the heart of our communities, and that is why we're here to support you. Right now, the smallest and the most vulnerable businesses are facing additional challenges when it comes to accessing tailored financial planning advice. Today, we are launching the Business Resilience Service in partnership with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, a free hotline operated by 125 business advisors from the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. This service provides Canadian business owners, including people who run charities and not-for-profits, with customized financial guidance who wouldn't otherwise have access to it, from navigating tax regulations and government supports to planning their path to recovery. Again, this service is meant for vulnerable small businesses with pressing financial needs and business owners who may otherwise have difficulty accessing tailored financial advice. You can now call toll-free 1-866-989-1080. This is available 7 days a week for the next 4 weeks. Nous continuerons à veiller à ce que toutes les entreprises.
We will continue to ensure that all businesses are supported every step of the way through this crisis.
Which leads me to another business support launch. As you've heard, applications for the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance are now available via cmhc.ca. To help business owners as efficiently as possible, we are staggering the applications. Aujourd'hui, c'est ouvert.
Today is open to property owners with up to 10 tenants in Atlantic Canada, British Columbia, Alberta, and Quebec, and open Thursday for those with over 10 tenants.
Tomorrow is open to landlords with up to 10 tenants in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and the Territories, and Wednesday is open to those with over 10 tenants. And then on Friday, it's open to all landlords across Canada. We expect the money to flow starting next week. While rent falls under provincial responsibility, we have stepped up to partner with provinces and territories to reduce rent by 75% for businesses who've experienced severe hardship. Through this program, if you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur, you will only have to pay 25% of your rent, while we cover 50% in forgivable loans to your landlord. If you're a landlord or a commercial property owner with a small business tenant eligible for this program, we're asking you to step up and to work with us and your tenant to apply. Given these extraordinary times that we are finding ourselves, your participation in the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program will help our businesses, our workers, and our economy. And this isn't just about doing the right thing. It is also making financial sense for you as a landlord. Because if your tenant declares bankruptcy and is evicted, you will lose all the steady stream of income you depend on. And you would face additional costs while you search for new tenants. You've all heard this before, but it remains true. We are all in this together. Et il est dans notre intérêt à tous de travailler ensemble.
And it's in all of our best interests to work together so we all can get through this.
We'll keep working hard to support all Canadians as we begin to restart our economy. We've got your back every step along the way. We're going to keep doing this. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Mary, d'avoir résumé deux
Thank you,
importantes
Mary, for
annonces de ce matin.
summarizing
Premièrement,
two significant
l'annonce de l'aide
announcements
d'urgence du
from
Canada
this
pour le loyer
morning.
commercial,
The first
les
about the emergency
propriétaires de
commercial
locaux
rent
commerciaux
assistance
dans les provinces de l'Atlantique, du Québec, de l'Alberta
for
et de
the
la
Atlantic,
Colombie-Britannique peuvent
for
dès
British
ce matin,
Columbia,
dès aujourd'hui,
Quebec, and other
soumettre
regions.
leur demande pour
They
venir
can
en
submit
aide à leurs locataires de petites
their
entreprises qui
requests
travaillent
in order to
dans des
help
conditions extraordinairement difficiles.
small
La
businesses who are
deuxième
going
bonne
through
nouvelle, c'est les discussions
extremely
qui vont avoir
challenging
lieu,
times.
qui vont continuer à
Second
avoir lieu, mais de manière encore plus intense avec les provinces et les territoires
thing
pour
for
la
good news,
fourniture
we're
de
going to be
congés de
working
maladie payés
with
pour les
provinces and
travailleurs au cours des
territories to
prochains mois.
ensure
On sait
paid
que
sick leave for
les
workers
prochains
for the
mois
next
vont être des
few
mois
months.
d'insécurité
We know that these
et que
next
les
few
travailleurs
months
vont
are going to
devoir
cause
tout
a lot
faire
of
ce qu'ils
insecurity,
doivent faire
and
pour
employers
protéger
are
à la
going to
fois
have
la
to do
santé,
all
leur
that they
santé,
can
la
to
santé
protect
de leur
their health,
famille et aussi la
that
santé
of
de
their
leurs
families,
collègues.
and
Et ces
the
congés de
health
maladie
of
payés
their
vont
colleagues.
maintenir
This
aussi
paid
la
sick leave
capacité de
will
ces
also
travailleurs de travailler
allow
avec leurs employeurs
workers to
pour
work
faire en
with
sorte
their
qu'au cours des
employers
prochains mois, on n'ait pas à choisir entre protéger sa
so that they
santé
don't have
et
to
payer
choose between
l'épicerie.
protecting
Donc,
their own
on
health
félicite
and buying groceries.
le
So we
gouvernement
would like to
canadien,
congratulate
évidemment,
the
mais
Canadian
aussi les
government for
gouvernements des
this,
provinces et
but
tous les
also
membres
the
de la Chambre des
provincial
communes qui
governments
ont
and the members
affiché
of the
leur
House of
souhait de
Commons
progresser sur
that
cet enjeu.
worked
Alors,
hard to
ceci
push
étant dit,
this
nous
issue
serions très
forward.
heureux de répondre à
That
vos
said,
questions.
we are going to be pleased to answer your
Merci,
questions.
Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Exceptionally today, we're going to start with the room to give a little more time to folks on the phone. Julie.
Monsieur Duclos or Ms. Singh, please. I'm just wondering how you can explain to Canadians that you're allowing employees of the Liberal Party to tap into the wage subsidy, even though you fundraise millions of dollars every year, and municipalities, for example, who have had to lay off thousands of people, can't tap into it.
Well, thank you for the question. Now, the absolute priority of the government, and I think a priority shared by most Canadians, is to support those workers and those families that are struggling through the very difficult circumstances that we are living through in the last few weeks. And that's why workers need that support, whoever they may work for, whether it's a small business, a larger business, and that's why we believe that this support is absolutely essential. It's guided by the principles of focusing on people and helping everyone go through the crisis.
As I said, municipalities can't tap into it. Naheed Nenshi of Calgary said, I wish I could tap into that program. They're laying off thousands of people. Are you going to change it so they can, for example?
Well, your very important question on municipalities is absolutely relevant. As we all know, the federal government just a few days ago did announce, either through the Prime Minister or through the Deputy Prime Minister, a real will to work with provinces and territories to see how we can support the essential work of municipalities and cities. But that needs obviously to be done in collaboration and with the full support of provinces and territories.
So not with a wage subsidy. Okay.
Ian?
Mr. Duclos, same question. I mean, how do you think it looks to Canadians to see political parties taking advantage of a wage subsidy program that you put forward?
Well, I would perhaps extend my earlier question, reminding everyone again that we are absolutely focused on workers and their families. We have had just a few weeks ago a Statistics Canada report saying that almost 6 million Canadians have either lost their job and all of their income or most of their income. So the circumstances are very difficult for workers and families, and that's why the emergency wage subsidies was put into place. Now that program, as all programs put into place in a relatively rapid time period, come with conditions and restrictions and obligations for transparency, and these obligations and restrictions apply to all businesses.
Right, but that's not what I asked you. I asked you, how do you think it looks to Canadians for political parties to accept the wage subsidy when, as my colleague pointed out, municipalities can't do that, and some companies are going under even with these programs in place. So how does it look to Canadians, do you think, a political party accepting a wage subsidy program that you put forward?
Well, I believe most Canadians know someone, either in their family or in their community or a friend that has lost his or her job in the last few weeks. And when we go through these difficult circumstances, we need to look after each other and support each other, whatever circumstances, in all cases, independently of the control of those particular workers, have led to the loss of that job and that income. So it's an absolute priority for this government to look after everyone and not to engage into discussions that might lead Canadians to feel less important than others. I think everyone is important in this particular crisis, and everyone needs to be supported according to rules and regulations that are transparent and apply to everyone.
Was the Liberal Party having to look at laying off staff without the wage subsidy?
I cannot speak for any particular organization. What I can do, however, is to speak for the vast majority of Canadians who understand that this crisis is very difficult for a large number of workers and families.
Thank you, Minister. Just a friendly reminder, that's one question, one follow-up. We'll now go to the phone. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. If you have a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. Si vous avez une question, appuyez sur l'étoile 1. The first question is from Marie Vestel Le Devoir. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Duclos. Question from Le Devoir for Minister Duclos. I have a question on today's announcement on paid sick leave, which is something that you intend to negotiate with provinces. I would like to know the federal perspective on the Canadian Labour Code, which has 3 paid sick days. Would the federal government like to change its Labour Code in order to ensure 10 paid sick leave days in the future? Answer. The answer is yes. The Canadian government will have to work with companies under its jurisdiction, even if a lot of employees are under provincial jurisdiction. More than 70% of people work under provincial jurisdiction, but if we're inviting provinces to work with the federal government, well, we need to help the federal government to do its job as well. Follow-up question? Can you tell me if the timeline is the same for provinces? Mr. Trudeau this morning talked about hoping to reach an agreement by this fall so that there are paid sick days for people in the fall. Will you be changing the Labour Code by the fall at the federal level? Mr. Trudeau also said that a lot of provinces agree with the idea of having 10 guaranteed paid sick leave days. Can you tell us about Quebec? Answer. These are 2 separate questions, so whether it be for provincial or federal workers, there are significant steps to take. The federal government needs to work with unions, with companies, federal companies, and so things will have to be done quickly, but they will also need to respect their partners. And for provinces, well, I think it will be up to the provinces to answer this question. Throughout Canada, we need to recognize that the coming months are going to be absolutely essential. Workers sometimes need to choose between protecting their health and being able to make ends meet. And we want to avoid such a situation. We want to avoid that a worker would make the wrong decision to go back to work even though they might have COVID-19 symptoms. They're putting their own health at risk, but they're also putting their colleagues' health at risk. And so their company is also at risk of not being able to maintain its activities. That's why we need to react quickly, but we need to do things right. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Next question, operator.
Merci. Thank you. The next question is from Stephanie Livett from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess. Thank you for taking the question. It's for Dr. Tam. The point, all along here of shutting down the economy, getting people to stay home and flatten this curve was to buy time for the healthcare system to get ready. And I just wonder what your assessment is of how ready the system actually is should there be a second wave. And I know there's provincial and local differences here, but just broadly speaking, what do you think? Is the healthcare system ready?
So I think we do have to prepare for potential for another wave, and I mean we always should prepare for the fact that the second wave could even be worse than the first wave. So that's a very important question. So we know that with the collective efforts, we did not exceed the health system capacity to cope with this initial wave, this first wave. So that's obviously been a tremendous amount of work to do that. But we got to keep going to increase capacity. I know that we haven't exceeded our ICU capacity, but I think provinces are continuing to ramp up, including ventilators and other supplies. But also, of course, as everybody knows, keep going on the ramping up of personal protective equipment. That's very important, should we get more patients as well. And also, generally, I would say, having learned perhaps how people have capitalized on virtual care, etc., keep going at some of those efforts that have worked, because some of those similar approaches should be continued so that you leave enough health system capacity. Of course, one of the key features of the current pandemic is the long-term care homes and seniors. So I do think that there's more work to be done in that area. Some of the long-term care homes or senior living areas haven't as yet completely extinguished their outbreaks. So that also tells us that we have to just keep going with those capacities, as well as the capacities for infection prevention and control in some of these higher risk settings, including shelters and in correctional facilities. But I think you can never be overly prepared, and that we need to just keep going with some of these capacity developments. And that goes along with lab testing as well. We're continuing to procure and including ramping up domestic capacity for some of our laboratory requirements.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you. My follow-up is for Minister Duclos, and I wanted to ask you about accountability and transparency during COVID-19 and the report out today that's recommending more of it, frankly. Why aren't ministries releasing more information proactively? There's a lot of delays with access to information requests. What steps are you taking to really make sure Canadians are getting a full picture of what's going on with government at the moment?
Well, what you say is absolutely correct. In particular, in the context of this crisis, we need transparency and openness. Canadians need information, and I would signal that you journalists are important players, important actors in making Canadians feel informed and reassured in many instances. And that's what public servants have been trying to do for the last few weeks. Now, we understand that it's not easy, certainly not easier for public servants to provide that level of information in the current context where they face professional and personal challenges. But I've reminded my colleagues and the Secretariat, the Treasury Board Secretariat is supportive of other departments in making sure that whatever is possible is done in the current context. What I would also add is that with the Information Commissioner, I've had exchanges looking forward, making sure that we can what we can do is, for instance, more proactive divulgation, dissemination of information, being more proactive as opposed to being reactive, and also a strong focus on technology. We are learning in this crisis the importance and the usefulness of technology and how it can perhaps lead to better ways of doing things in the future.
Thank you, Minister. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question est de Émilie Bergeron de l'agence QMI. La parole est à vous.
Question from l'agence QMI. Yes, I have a question regarding emergency rent assistance. Since the portal was opened this morning at 8 a.m. How many requests have been sent in so far?
Well, thank you for the question. As I stated earlier, we are opening up the portal in phases to a certain number of provinces today and tomorrow, with landlords that have more than 10 tenants, and then open to everyone on Friday. We are going to monitor the take-up of this, and as I said as well, the importance and the focus of this Canadian commercial rent assistance is to help our small businesses that have been hardest hit during this time, so that they can manage through this period and get on that road to recovery and restart.
Émilie, en suivi?
Follow-up question. My second question is for Monsieur Duclos regarding the wage subsidy use by the Liberal Party. We understand that you want to help workers regardless of who they work for, but Canadians know that the Liberals and the Conservatives have healthy budgets. What message is this sending to Canadians when companies are struggling to pay their employees? What message does it send that traditional parties that have enough funding may have access to this assistance when others have great difficulty accessing it? What message is this sending? Answer. Thank you. The message that we've been sending from the beginning is that we want to support workers, and the wage subsidy was created for that. There are very solid and very clear criteria that ensures that the wage subsidy is given to workers. If a company uses this for something other than wages, then there would be significant consequences. 225% for the wage subsidy, which needs to be given to workers. Canadian workers and families are currently going through extremely difficult times, and that is why this subsidy was created. We want to make sure that all companies respect the rules, regardless of who they are. Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Julie, I believe you had additional questions.
C'est pour Monsieur Duclos, s'il vous plaît.
My question is for Monsieur Duclos.
In terms of, this is about the disaster that continues to be underway in long-term care homes, and specifically about Rivera, which is one of the biggest chains in the country. So I'm just wondering, I believe it is still under the Public Sector Investment Board, which reports to you, right? For Treasury Board, the Public Sector Investment Board. So I'm wondering, have you had direct talks with Rivera about improving its conditions, considering that it's got a massive lawsuit against it and all the deaths from COVID?
Thank you. Well, there are two things. One, which I cannot comment on, which is the particular circumstances and details of a lawsuit or a class action. That would be, of course, inappropriate for a minister to comment on. What I can say, however, is that, and as you all know as well, and which is very important, is that we are extremely saddened by the difficult circumstance in which many of our seniors have been going through in the last few weeks. We know that this requires a level of leadership which is in strong support of the absolutely important responsibility and jurisdiction of provinces and territories. So although we are mindful of the fact that the federal government needs to be working respectfully, we have signaled a number of times that we want to do whatever we can to support the work of provinces and territories in managing the health sector.
The Public Sector Investment Board reports to Parliament, reports to you every year. Are you going to be more diligent about what's going on in these homes, regardless of the lawsuit?
Well, I think we will be certainly more mindful of the importance of protecting our seniors, and we will use all the tools that are appropriate for the federal government to do that.
Thank you, Minister. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse pour aujourd'hui. That's it for today. Thank you, everyone.